A Patrick Sycamore story. Whitenby, the Preinfernum, by Dakota-Storm Boggan Thompson. Part 1. I am a paranormal investigator of sorts. I stop demons and corrupt spirits from harming people, and sometimes have to fight for the soul of a person. I have in my life of 65 years experienced the strangest of things. I have seen demons being born into our world from the bodies of women. I have witnessed the devil speaking through fire to his followers, and I have fought evil in every which way that I could. People have accused me of being a fake, a fraud. These people were very quick to change their minds, after seeing monstrosities from the depths of the fiery, infernal pit. My friend, Daniel Belcher, a retired doctor, had written to me of strange occurrences where he lived, a seaside town in Yorkshire called Whitenby, which is split in half by the River Esk. Here is the letter in full. To my dear Sycamore, how are you, old chap? I hope that you are well. I took your advice with my tulips and azaleas, and they have bloomed beautifully. My lettuce plants are growing, and no slugs have invaded my greenhouse, so I should have a good crop this year. My sister's second grandson has just been born, and she has sent me a framed photograph through the post. My reason for writing to you is very serious. Something is going on. I'm not sure what, but I think that your skills might be needed. The people here have started to act peculiarly. They don't talk to each other, and even my usually friendly neighbour ignores me. Most mysterious. Please come soon. My spare room is always free. Yours, Daniel Belcher. After reading this letter, I began to pack for a trip to my friend's house. I believed that whatever was going on in Whitenby was malevolent. Why would everybody just stop talking to one another? I took my specialist equipment with me, including a crucifix that had been made from wood, a case of herbs and chemicals, a box of energy tablets, and the Codex, a book some 4,000 years old, which holds the knowledge of how to destroy demons and creatures of the most vile and sickening nature. The Codex was bound in thick leather and was very well worn. The Vatican had sent me written warnings about this book and the power that it holds. They have tried to take it from me several times, but they have always failed. I obtained the book from an old Hindu monk who I had been close with. He had visited me one time and gifted it to me because he had grown too old to protect it. For years this book had provided me with the information which has led to the unravelling of satanic plots and allowed me to stop abominations from the deepest, darkest corners of hell. I also took with me a large supply of holy water. When I had packed my car, a Hillman Hunter GLS, I had put my dog Maximilian in the back seat, where he promptly fell asleep. Max had been blessed by 3 priests, and when he needed to, fought like a wolf. We set off, and my mind began to filter through ideas. It was possible that the strange occurrences in Whitenby could be a result of a fear. That fear could be traced to a number of sources: cultist threats, demonic control, or soul drainage. Another theory came to my mind, but I banished it. It would be wrong of me to even think of it. It took me nearly 4 hours to reach Whitenby, and I arrived at about 3:30 in the afternoon. The sky was overcast with dark, thundering clouds. The air was filled with the odour of the ozone and another smell, the smell of salt. I stopped my car outside a newsagent's called McCrowell's and got out to buy a newspaper. The shopkeeper was thin and pale and was probably in his early 20s. He was dressed in denim trousers and a black t-shirt. He was quite tall and had a closely shaved head. When I went to pay for a copy of the Whitenby Gazette, I asked if he knew of any good tea shops around. "You might try Trish's Coffee House on Skinner Street," was the shopkeeper's answer. "They're the best in town." I thanked the shopkeeper and went back to my car. Max had just woken up when I got back into the car and was staring out of the window at a woman dressed in a pink overcoat. The woman was staring into the car at me with a pair of bloodshot eyes. I thought at first that she must have been mad, and would have continued to think this if it hadn't been for the fact that as I drove along the streets, everyone was staring at my car. I pulled into a parking bay in front of Trish's coffee shop, and both me and Max got out of the car. Everyone sitting outside the cafe stared at us hard, and I felt a little uncomfortable as I went to order a cup of Earl Grey tea. Max and I sat outside at one of the tables and waited in silence for my cup of tea. Nobody spoke. I didn't hear a word. The staff member who brought me my beverage was a pale-faced youth with light brown hair and freckles. I thanked him and received an unfriendly stare. After finishing my drink, Max and I got back into the car and made our way to Daniel Belcher's house. Daniel lived in a small terrace house which was painted bright yellow. It had small windows and a spacious back garden. I pulled up outside the yellow terrace building and got out of the car. After letting Max out of the back seat, I got my suitcases out of the boot, and with much difficulty due to my luggage's weight, walked towards Daniel's abode. As I approached the building, I noticed large amounts of shattered glass bottles on the street directly in front of the yellow house. There were also some sizable stones. I knocked and waited at the door with Max. I heard the lock click before Belcher opened his door and stared about the street, putting his fingers to his lips to silence any greeting that I might have given. My friend looked haggard and exhausted. Daniel picked up some of my luggage and hurried me and Max in. When my friend had closed his door and locked it, I asked, "What's going on?" Daniel looked at me gravely for a moment before saying, "There is something terrible happening in Whitenby, something malevolent. The people have become possessed. They keep attacking the house. You've got to stop them." As Daniel finished speaking, he collapsed onto the floor, completely unconscious. Part 2. After dragging Belcher to his settee and lying him down, I went to the kitchen and hunted about to see what food supplies he had. I found 3 tins of baked beans, 1 Fray Bentos pie, and half a loaf of stale bread in his cupboards. His fridge contained 1 packet of bacon and 1 bar of chocolate. I judged from the low amount of food that my friend had not been out of the house in about 2 weeks. I returned to the front door and picked up the lead-lined case which I carried the codex in and opened it. The smell of ages wafted over me as I lifted the book out of the case. I flipped through the ancient pages, my mind wandering through theories. I thought back to the theory that I had tried to banish from my mind while I was driving my car, a very dangerous theory. After about an hour, Daniel woke up with a start. "Are they here yet?" he asked. "Who?" I asked. "The people and the monsters. They'll be here soon. They start throwing things at the house at about 4 o'clock. People stand there, holding bottles and stones without speaking. The monsters, I can't get the sight of them out of my head. Some of them look just like people, and then they change shape. Others are huge. They are terrible to describe." "You've confirmed my worst fears," I said. "Which are?" "Whitenby has been overrun by members of the Preinfernum." "Who are they?" asked Daniel. "Before hell existed, there was the Preinfernum, a place which, according to a few fragments of ancient texts, is a place of torture. The people that have seen these fragments believe that this version of hell was what inspired the modern-day pit of fire." I took a breath before continuing. "Contained within the pages of this book," I said, pointing at the closed codex, are the facts and records of the Preinfernum, within which lived horrific monstrosities that would slowly feast on the souls of victims for eternity. When Lucifer was banished from heaven, hell, which at the time was only a minor place, suddenly had a surge of power and closed all ways into the Preinfernum. Before they did this, though, the devil and his most powerful followers raided the depths of the Preinfernum and stole the Book of Souls. The book held the secret of who would end up in the Preinfernum. After taking this book, Lucifer managed to escape from the place and sealed it with the use of several thousand souls. No creature has ever been known to escape from the Preinfernum because of the seals, but I believe that something has either escaped or the seals have been broken, and this will result in the apocalypse, but not like the one that many believe will happen. The Preinfernum itself will become the world, and no one will be able to escape its grasp, whether they be innocent or damned. If I am right, then I will need assistance in resealing the gateway to the Preinfernum. There are only 3 people who have the same skills as I, and that I have trusted to read through the Codex. They are old friends of mine, and we have not met together as a rule. Why? Asked Daniel. Our reason is simple, I said. If we are together, then that means that our greatest fight has come, and that we may be the last and most powerful line of defense against the power of evil. We made a pact never to meet up, unless something as important as this should occur. I got up from the armchair that I'd been sitting in and walked to the hallway. What are you doing? Belcher asked me. Making a phone call, I replied. I picked up Daniel's home phone and tapped in a number. As the phone rang, I felt a tension in my shoulders that I hadn't felt for a very long time. Somebody picked up the receiver on the other end of the line and spoke. Archibald Boggan here. If this is another call about car insurance, then I'm not interested. It's time, I said. Patrick? Said Archibald in a shocked tone. What has happened? What is going on? I need you to call Elric Hoare and Gilbert Swizzlestick. Meet me at number 8 Newton Street, Whitenby. Understood, said Archibald. I'll see you soon, I said. I put down the receiver and went back to the living room, where Daniel sat massaging his head. My friends will be here soon, I said, sitting down. All we have to do is wait. Part 3. As soon as I began to relax in my seat, I heard a terrible crash of breaking glass. I went to one of the windows and saw a number of people standing in a line about 10 feet away from the house. The only noise that I could hear was the sound of impacting projectiles. Nobody was speaking. A few members of the group were simply standing still. I soon saw why. The motionless figures suddenly dropped to the floor and their backs split open. From the holes in their backs, I watched disgusting creatures crawl out and merge into one massive form. The monster was about 9 feet tall, and its colour was an oily black. Its body seemed to pulse like a mass of octopuses squashed together in a mould. This huge abomination began to advance towards the house. I moved away from the window and turned to face Daniel. How long do their attacks usually last? I asked. They can be outside the house from 10 minutes to 3 hours, replied Daniel. I went back to the window and watched the monster come within touching distance of the house. The creature touched the house and began to melt. The resulting slop began to flow over the house and cover the windows. Daniel came to my side and said, That thing keeps trying to get into the air bricks in the chimney, but I've plugged them up. It can't get in. The obscenity that flowed over the house was truly horrible. How many people had given their skins to this creature? Daniel and I carried on watching for a few minutes before the oily fluid began to flow to the ground. The loose skins that lay on the floor were soon filled with the monster, and the people outside began to disperse. "How many times a day do these attacks occur?" I asked. "Only once," replied Daniel. "I'm scared that if I go out of the house then they'll get me. I've seen it happen several times to ordinary people outside my window. They get held by their arms, and the ooze gets transferred via the mouth. The victim is left in the street until the creature within has a sufficient hold, and then it controls the person to get up off of the ground and walk away. I haven't seen anybody escape from its grasp. It is terrifying." "I think that I know what this creature is and what it's called," I said. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "It is called Limus niger," I began. "The creature is from the very bottom of the Preinfernum. Its purpose is to inhabit people's bodies and corrupt their minds and souls. When this has been done, the people it possesses all commit suicide, and their soul will travel to the Preinfernum, where it is used to feed its inhabitants. If the Limus niger is removed before its victim commits suicide, then the victim's soul can recover from the trauma over a long period of time. When Lucifer sealed the Preinfernum, it stopped the flow of corrupt souls entering, and so they were redirected to the place we know as Hell. According to my codex, the Limus niger was still inside the Preinfernum when it was sealed. This means that the Preinfernum has broken its seals and has sent the Limus niger to collect more souls." "How do we stop it?" asked Daniel. "I'll explain that when my friends get here," I replied. "For now, let's just concern ourselves with what we can have for dinner." Daniel and I made a meal out of one of the tins of baked beans and a few slices of his stale loaf. Max had a tin of beans all to himself before curling up in front of one of the wall-mounted radiators. I washed the dishes. Daniel and I talked for a few hours. He told me what he had seen, and I told him information on the monsters of the Preinfernum, what they could do, and how they were able to do certain things. That night I slept on Daniel's settee. It was a restless sleep with dreams that I didn't particularly enjoy. The next morning I was woken by Max, who was gently tugging at my hand with his huge teeth. I followed my canine friend to the window, where I saw 3 cars parking up behind my own. One was a Morris Minor 1000 two-door saloon. Another was a Ford Cortina Mark III, and the last was a Vauxhall Victor. My friends had arrived. I went to the front door and waited for someone to knock. The knock was rapid, and I opened the door quickly. My friends rushed in swiftly and set down their suitcases in the living room. I closed the door and locked it. Max quickly made himself known, and enjoyed being patted by the new arrivals. "What's going on then?" asked Archibald. "My friend Daniel, who is asleep upstairs, wrote a letter to me 2 weeks ago, which arrived yesterday. In this letter, Daniel believed that my skills were needed because of some odd happenings. In the 2 weeks that it took the letter to arrive, Whitenby has become a town of the possessed. But hell has no part in these happenings. The people here are being forcefully possessed by the entity called Limus niger. As we all know, this creature comes from one place, the Preinfernum. I believe that the seals that the devil placed on the ways in and out of the Preinfernum have been broken. This means that unless we can reseal the breach, or breaches in the seals, then humanity will cease to exist, which is why you are here. Together our expertise is unrivaled. All we need to do is find the source of the activity, and then we can deal with it." "Whitenby is a big place," said Elric. "It will take quite a while to find." "I know," I said. "I believe that if we search together, we'll be able to find it. We should not split up at any point unless it is absolutely necessary." "Where do we start?" asked Gilbert. "The waterfront," I replied. "We'll search street by street for possible anomalies in building structures. Let's get to the cars. While my comrades readied themselves at the front door, I wrote a note for Daniel, so that he knew that we had gone out to search for the Preinfernum's gateway, and that I'd left Max behind to protect him if necessary. I put the codex into its lead-lined case and took it with me to the car. Years ago, when we had made our pact not to meet unless absolutely necessary, we had fitted radios into our cars so that we could communicate on the move. We drove down to the waterfront and parked up. "We'll check the beach first," I said through the radio. "Make yourselves appear as though this is a reunion of old friends." "It is in its own way," returned Archibald. We got out of the cars and went straight to a set of steps that led to the beach. We walked along the beach, studying the sea defense wall, but there were no anomalies in its structure. We decided to drive through the streets to try and find anything which might attract our attention. But before we reached the stairs, a group of people spilled down them and started running towards us. There were 10 people in total. All of them were large men who all stared blankly at us. "Crucifixes out," I said to my comrades. We all took out a 10-inch crucifix from our overcoat pockets and raised them towards our foes. "Holy water out," I said. We each took out a bottle of holy water, pulled out the cork with our teeth, and placed our thumbs over the mouth. The possessed people had encircled us, and we touched shoulders in our defensive circle. Our attackers began to close in. We splashed the holy water at their hands and faces and watched them crumple to the floor. "To the cars!" I exclaimed. We bolted up the stairs and managed to reach the cars. I was just opening my door when a large man came up behind me and grabbed me by the shoulder. I span round and landed a blow to his chin, sending him sprawling. We drove quickly down the waterfront road before turning down a lane towards the interior of the town. "We've got to ditch the cars in a car park somewhere," I said through the radio. "They'll be used to track us otherwise." I turned into a little car park and parked in a bay near some bushes. My comrades followed suit, and after I'd grabbed the codex from the back seat of my Hillman Hunter GLS, we set off down a small road. "What's the plan?" asked Gilbert after about 10 minutes. "We get to a church," I replied. "We'll work out how to get back to Daniel's house, and then I was interrupted by Archibald, who said, "Patrick, I think I've found the Preinfernum's portal." Archibald pointed at a huge, obsidian black building with massive windows and hundreds of small gargoyles. The air around it smelt of corruption, and its walls were smeared with black ooze that seemed to move of its own accord. It was immense, and I felt a shudder travel through me when I set my eyes upon it. "Good work," I said. "Let's get back to Daniel's house. My equipment is there. We'll collect it and come back here and get into that building. Then we'll close the breach." We began to jog through the streets, and we soon made it back to Daniel's house. Part 4. Daniel's house was under siege when we arrived, and we were forced into fighting through a crowd of silent, possessed people. I spotted Daniel staring out of his window with an expression of terror pasted on his face. I signaled my friend to open the door quickly and watched him disappear. Daniel's door opened as we reached it, and we piled into the house with the speed of leopards. Daniel closed his door and relocked it. "What happened?" my friend asked. "We were set upon on the beach by a group of possessed men, and managed to escape by the skin of our teeth. We've parked our cars at a little's, and while we were on our way back, Archibald found the portal that the Preinfernum is using. What's your plan?" "I'm not sure yet. I need a minute to think." My comrades and I made our way to Daniel's living room, where we sat in tense silence. "I think I know what we need to do," I said, after a few minutes of intense contemplation. "What do we need to do?" asked Elric. I am going to ask you to take the biggest risk of your lives, I began. We need to reach the portal, and the only way to get there is by walking. If I use the codex correctly, then we may be able to get there. What do you mean? Asked Gilbert. The codex is a vessel of knowledge, I said, but it is also the ultimate protection against enemies, so long as it is in the right hands. My plan is to carry the codex in plain view. Its power should protect us against attackers. I cannot guarantee it will work. I've never needed to test it. But according to an account written within it, a Buddhist monk walked through a battle between two warring factions and suffered no harm while holding the book to his chest. Will you trust me with your lives? My comrades gave a nod of agreement, and we set about arming ourselves with the holy relics that were in my case of equipment. Gilbert took a silver exorcist crucifix from the 17th century, while Archibald took a brass crucifix from a 19th century monastery, and Elric chose a gold crucifix from a Cornish church. I chose a wooden crucifix that had been carved by a Catholic priest from Little Walsingham's Shrine of Our Lady. We stocked ourselves up with bottles of holy water. I blessed a cup full of water, which we all drank from, so that if anything tried to possess us, it would find itself hurt by our very bodies. Daniel and Max also drank some for this reason. Daniel decided to stay at his house, as he didn't have any supernatural expertise. I offered my friend Max's protection again, but he said that I might need him more, and that nothing could get into the house. I put my crucifix into my overcoat's inside pocket, and prepared to walk before my comrades. Daniel opened his door and wished us luck. The silent possessed were still outside of Daniel's house and began to move towards us. When the possessed people were within touching distance, they veered away sharply and stared at us angrily. We walked through small streets and lanes until we reached the Preinfernum's portal, the walls of which seemed to move a little as we approached its doors. Gilbert and Elric took a hold of two giant door handles and pushed them down. The demoniac building's doors opened, and the scent of rotting flesh and corruption reached our nostrils. My comrades turned towards me and awaited my signal to enter. "Forward," I said. "We must close the doors when we get inside." I strode into the building, and my comrades closed the doors. The inside of the building was astonishing. Floors were raised 10 feet in the air, the walls jutted at uneven points, and the reek of death was strong. "What is wrong with this place?" wondered Archibald. "It exists in multiple dimensions," I said. "Everything that you see around you exists in different times, places, and spaces. At the moment, these dimensional parts are stable, but this entire building is a huge bomb." "What do you mean?" asked Gilbert. "This building is a weapon," I explained. "When the fuse is lit, its interdimensional parts will merge with the time continuity and cause a rupture in the fabric of space and time, and the Preinfernum will become the world, a world of constant, looped death. This will, of course, cause an infinite food supply of souls for the Preinfernum, and there won't be a force in existence other than God himself, which will be able to stop it from expanding. If we prevent any more abominations from escaping from the portal within this building and seal it, then the things that you see around you will return to their correct places, and the building itself will revert back to its original form." Max growled loudly. "We have company," announced Archibald. Coming from two directions were creatures that defied the designs of existence. Creatures which crawled and hopped and ran were coming towards us. Some of them looked as though they were cages made of flesh, "Run!" I cried. "Follow me and run!" We set off down a path made of some sort of living, pulsing skin that seeped a greenish fluid that stank of rotting flesh. "I don't know about any of you," I yelled as we ran, "but I'm looking forward to a cup of Earl Grey tea when this is all over." My comrades gave a yell of agreement as we ran. We seemed to run for hours and hours, which of course wasn't not possible. For when you run through spaces of misplaced time and dimensions, you could be running for days and not realize it. As we ran, I sensed something above us and looked up for a moment. Above us were huge, flying creatures that seemed to writhe through the air. These flying creatures landed before us and we came to a stop. "Creatures of the Preinfernum, let us pass," I commanded, raising my crucifix before me. "The power of Christ commands it." The monsters covered their faces and moved out of our way speedily. We began to run again, but I soon heard our airborne enemies above us. "What do we do?" Archibald called to me. "Stop," I replied. "We must dig into this path." We stopped and began to tear away at the flesh path which we had run on. "Why are we doing this?" asked Elric. "This is a coolant artery," I said. "This is converting material into a corrupt fluid, which is cooling the portal. This coolant stops the portal from overheating and breaking down. Demoniac technology is very complex." "How do you know all of this?" Archibald queried. "It's all in the Codex under the heading Demon Technology of the Preinfernum," I replied. "Oh yes," said Archibald. "I remember reading that bit now." Max had caught on to what we were doing to the path and had started to tear away huge chunks of pulsing flesh. I told Archibald to pick Max up for our journey through the coolant artery, as he might get lost. "Everyone, link an arm," I said. "This is going to be a very uncomfortable experience." We linked arms, took deep breaths, and jumped into the large, leaking hole that we'd made, just as the twin hordes of monsters came into view. The fluid that we travelled in flowed up our noses and stung our eyes, but we held on to each other. I was worried that Max wouldn't make it, because he was likely to drown. We travelled for several minutes, our hearts pulsing in our ears, our lungs burning for a refilling of oxygen. As we reached a bend in the artery, I dug my heel into the inner flesh of it and hoped that we had the strength to tear open a hole above us. Archibald, Elric and Gilbert began to puncture the artery's flesh with their crucifixes, and we soon had a large enough hole for us to climb out of. When we were on the outer flesh of the artery, we stared around us at the truly monstrous, organic technology being used to control and process the portal. I handed Elric the Codex and stooped down to Max. As I had feared, Max's lungs had filled with the corrupt fluid that we had travelled in. I felt for a pulse and for a moment was sure he had died, but was startled when Max began to cough up the corrupt coolant and stood up looking weak but thankful to be alive. I took the ancient book from Elric and asked him to carry Max over his shoulder so that he could recover. We began to jog down the coolant artery and soon came to a huge chamber of unmeasurable proportions. In the centre of this chamber was a huge lake of black liquid with hundreds of thin, flesh pipes leading into it. The black fluid was completely still, and the flesh pipes made strange gurgling noises as fluids flowed through them. "Gentlemen," I said, "we have reached the portal of the Preinfernum." Part 5. As we looked at the various organic machines around us, I felt a strong repulsion towards it all. Who couldn't really? Masses of pipes made from flesh were everywhere. "We need to seal the portal now," I said, "before we are discovered."
"You have already been discovered,"
said a voice as deep as the loneliest abyss. "Who are you?" I demanded.
"I am the Preinfernum,"
replied the voice.
I will feast on your souls and drain them of all their energies.
I'm afraid that you've made a massive error, I said. Our souls are destined for heaven. Our souls are untouchable.
Is that right?
Said the voice. Indeed, I replied. It is written in the Book of Souls.
Have you seen the book?
Asked the Preinfernum. No, I said, but I extracted the information from a demon.
A shame,
said the deep voice.
At least I'll have the satisfaction of killing your bodies.
The black portal began to ripple, and its surface broke with a splash. From the black water had come the essence of the Preinfernum, a terrifying mixture of all human nightmares and fears. A monstrosity so abhorrent that I very nearly vomited. The form of the monster was vile. Black ooze seeped out from every one of its orifices, and it stank of necrotized flesh. That is ugly, said Archibald. The monster was about 10 feet tall and had muscles the size of bricks. Its hands were clawed and bare of flesh. Its whole body had no flesh, and was instead covered in masses of muscle. Its face was awful and horrifying. It was simply a bare skull with 2 black eyes. Am I meant to be impressed? I said. You are laughable.
You dare insult the Preinfernum,
bellowed the monster. Yes, I returned. I dare to insult you. You are pathetic. You think that appearances can scare someone like me and my comrades. You disgust me with your ridiculousness.
You dare,
cried the monster, coming towards me. The monster reached out to grab me, but I dodged to one side before its claws touched me.
I will show you terrible things before you die,
stated the Preinfernum. You don't know the meaning of terrible, I said. You are nothing more than a speck.
Your insults will only earn you more torture,
said the monster. Will they? I said. I think you've made a mistake.
What is my mistake?
Asked the Preinfernum. You have caused me and my comrades to be present, which means that you will die. I took my crucifix in my hand and began to walk quickly towards the abomination that the Preinfernum had spat forth as its image. I began to recite a memorized section of the Codex. May the demons of the dark wither and perish. May the angels of heaven act as our guardians, and may the light of the next day pierce the darkness of evil. May the beings of darkness crawl back to their foul depths, and may they stay there for all of eternity. May they die a torturous and agonizing death that is deserved of only the purest of evils. The monster began to back away. My comrades came forward and raised their crucifixes. May the light of the sun burn away the corruption of evil's eternal night and turn its inhabitants to ash. May the abominations of evil forever be imprisoned in their own pit of doom. May the minds of demons be torn from their bodies, and may their bodies be destroyed. May God cast his eye towards the evil of the Preinfernum and destroy it with his infinite power. May his angels slay all the demons of the dark, and may they triumph. The Preinfernum's image began to tremble with fear. May the demons of the dark feel the fear of 1,000, and may they tremble before the light.
Stop,
yelled the Preinfernum.
You cannot do this.
We can, and we will, I said. Max, I cried, pointing at the Preinfernum's image. Seek! Max leapt forward and tore at the left leg of the monster. The abomination before us fell onto its back and tried vainly to tear Max away from its leg. Max, cease! I called. The huge Rottweiler came to my side and shook himself. Grab its legs, I said to my comrades. It's time to end this confrontation. My friends grabbed the monster's legs, and I stepped onto its chest, digging my feet in with each step, feeling its bones crack. I took out my penknife, bent down, and cut into the chest of the Preinfernum's image. This is your day of judgment, I said. This is the day that you are defeated.
You might stop this body,
said the Preinfernum.
but you cannot stop me. I am the Preinfernum. There is no killing me.
I know, I said. That's why I'm going to seal the portal and trap you forever within.
It took thousands of damned souls to seal my portals. How are you going to seal it?
I have my ways, I replied. I took out a bottle of holy water from my overcoat pocket and emptied its contents into the monster's chest before pushing in my crucifix. Move back, I said. This is going to be disgusting. We removed ourselves from the area and watched from behind a huge, fleshy pipe as the Preinfernum's physical image began to twist and expand and convulse.
You may seal me away,
said the Preinfernum,
but one day I shall return, and I will destroy this world and grow until I fill all of existence.
Good luck with that, I said. The Preinfernum's physical body exploded in a mess of shattered bone, torn muscle and mushed organs. Give me the codex, I said to Gilbert. I took the book from my friend and flipped through the pages. When I reached the desired page, I told my comrades to keep an eye out for the demons of the Preinfernum. I began to recite. May this broken seal be fixed by the angels of heaven, and may it never be opened again. May the evil around us be destroyed. May the machines of the Preinfernum disappear from the world. May the world not be tainted by the evil within these demoniac walls. May the walls crumble away. May the demons here be crushed to death by their own walls. I beg as no one has begged before, as no one has ever done in the history of mankind, or any race of any realm. I beg for an act of permanence. I ask for an act that can only be carried out by one. I ask for an act of God.
No,
boomed the Preinfernum.
This cannot be happening.
It is though, I laughed. It is your end. I turned to my friends and said, we need to leave now, or we'll be sealed into the Preinfernum. I called to Max, and we all began to run along the coolant artery we had cut open. All around us, walls began to fall. Monsters were crushed, seemingly by gravity. Time fluctuated. The raised floors of the Preinfernum's bomb began to crack, and light spat forth from them. The artery along which we travelled began to convulse. All around us a white mist had formed, and we cut through it like knives. Behind us I heard the voice of the Preinfernum roar.
I will return. There is no destroying me or my minions. I will fill existence.
Lightning began to strike in the air, and destroyed anything that it touched. Max was bounding ahead of us as we came within sight of the door through which we had entered this demoniac place. I pushed the doors open with all of my strength, and we burst through them with the speed of banshees. We stopped short as we discovered that what seemed to be the entire town of Whitenby had gathered outside the evil building. All of the people began to convulse and throw themselves onto the floor, vomiting forth black ooze. We watched as the Limus Niger flowed past us into the crumbling building that had been constructed to take over the world. I watched a spot of bright light in the sky grow in size. "Take cover!" I shouted to the dazed people in front of us. All of the people before us began to yell and scream out in terror as they ran from the building. As me and my comrades ran, I stopped for a moment and watched a huge bolt of white lightning slam into the ground, sealing forever the portal of the Preinfernum. The lightning bolt dissipated after a moment, and my friends came to my side. I felt the ears of Max as he touched my hand. Where the building of death had been was a grassy area with small fruit trees and white benches. "Well," I said to my comrades, "that's a job well done." Part 6. After collecting our cars, we drove back to Daniel's house, where we found him jumping for joy outside the terrace. "You did it!" he cried. "You did it!" We went into the yellow terrace house and sat ourselves down in my friend's living room, where we promptly fell asleep. Daniel woke us up the next day, and after washing our bodies and clothing, we made our way to Trish's coffee house on Skinner Street, where we ate bacon rolls and drank several cups of Earl Grey tea. "Do you think we'll ever have to meet up again?" Archibald asked me. I wish that we could work together all of the time, but both the binding pact to only unite together under certain conditions, and our tasks of destroying the forces of any evil, stop us from doing this. We walked back to our cars, and after saying farewell to my friend Daniel Belcher, we drove away down different roads, knowing that it was likely that we would never meet again. As I drove through one of the streets of Whitenby, I saw something astonishing. Out of the corner of my eye, standing in front of a shop, was a tall man, dressed in a black suit with a matching black fedora. I turned my head to look for the figure, but it had disappeared. Could it have been that I had seen the same man from Liverpool, who had helped me in defeating Granny Rambles? Could it have been the mysterious Vincent Straw? My mind tumbled through different theories, but none of them were definite. I wondered if we would meet again, if he had been sent to protect me, or perhaps to destroy me. He could be anything. Only time would tell.